So you've probably heard me talk about CBD a lot on this channel. I have various videos, but today we're going to talk with a guest of mine, Meredith, and how it literally saved her life. I'm Risa Morimoto, your host. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, and you're watching Modern Aging, where we chat about innovative and holistic ways to elevate our health and well-being as we age. If you're new to the channel, I'd love for you to subscribe. All you got to do is click on that little red button below with that little bell next to it to be sure to be notified whenever a new episode is uploaded. And if you're enjoying these videos, I'd love it if you give it a little thumbs up. That way it tells YouTube to show it to like-minded people. So today my guest is Meredith. Meredith suffers from a disease called Pelvic Congestion Syndrome, PCS. She was in chronic pain for about 7 years. They couldn't figure out what was going on with her. They couldn't figure out her pain. They thought it was mental health issues. They were giving her antidepressants. They were trying to give her painkillers. They were giving her everything, and nothing was working. She could not figure out what was wrong with her, but she knew that something dire was. And so finally, after a pregnancy and several other, and then coming in contact with a doctor who could help her, they discovered that she had PCS. And then, out of desperation to relieve the pain, she stumbled upon CBD. This is after she had taken all these different medications. And with CBD, within 24 hours, or within 48 hours rather, she was already finding relief. And so now she has this very strict regimen and routine on taking CBD every single day. And it's literally saved her life. So if you are a chronic pain sufferer or you suffer from extreme anxiety, you got to watch this because it's really incredible. And it's really important about how this plant medicine can change potentially your quality of life, and it's a game changer. Meredith, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you, essentially about how CBD saved your life in more ways than one, and how it hopefully your story is really going to resonate with so many people and help so many others as well. But before we kind of get to your story and what actually happened and how CBD transformed your health, maybe you can give me a little bit of a background, where you're from and how your illness kind of came about.
Yeah. So I live in the Midwest. I live in Wisconsin, and I am mom. Now I got to think about this. I am mom to 4 kiddos, 3 which are biological. So that's an important part of the story, to just know that I've gone through 3 different childbirths. And my illness, or syndrome, we'll say, because that's what it's actually called, went undiagnosed. I don't even know how long, actually. I just know that I suffered from absolute chronic back pain for about 7 years before I really found any relief.
So when you're saying pain, so like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst kind of pain ever, 1 being kind of, a mild headache.
Yeah, it started, I would say, like a 2 to 3, more of that like annoying, just kind of there. It was in my lower left back. And as it would get worse, I would put my hand back there and sort of rub it or hold it. And during this time frame, which is also an important part of the story, my husband and I had tried to conceive. We did successfully conceive, but then I ended up having 5 miscarriages. And wow. Yeah. And so, anyone who's been through a miscarriage, you go through the process. I mean, the emotional stuff set aside, just the physical part of it can be really traumatic for a woman's body. And I think, people do the aftercare. I think we just like everything in sort of medical and health, we find a process and we just sort of stick to it. And unless you're around a group of people who's going to be extremely innovative and, dive in deeper to what would be the long-term potential impact. And so I experienced these 5 miscarriages, did the aftercare exactly like they should, so no complaint. But I don't know that we ever dug deeper. Like, nobody asked the question, like, why did you have 5 miscarriages? I mean, I did. I kept saying, like, wait, that seems like a lot. Why is this not happening? And instead of really advocating for myself, my husband and I were just sort of like, well, I guess it wasn't meant to be. We are not going to have a baby. And we had had children when we came into our marriage. So I think we just sort of let it go, which again, at the time, that was a decision based on other things, not necessarily my health and wellness, right? So it wasn't until the pain started coming that I started connecting some of the dots. And my first couple doctors I went to said that the pain really, at a level of maybe a 2 to 3, sometimes it would be a little bit more than that it probably was just stress related, a pulled muscle. I kept getting prescribed, anxiety meds for bipolar disorder, meds for, just anxiety, like depression. I mean, I had been on so many meds. And I had nothing to do, but I mean, I had to believe them, right? They're the experts. And so, I sort of lived that way and thought, geez, I guess I'm going to have this sort of low grade pain for the rest of my life. And that was really a bummer because I remember thinking that was about aging. And I was really only like 34 at the time. And
Oh
I
my
would just be
God.
like, well, I guess this is what happens when you get older. And I remember my daughters being like, you're not old. Like, this isn't normal. Like, 30s and 40s for women and 50s should be these magical times. And you're really like, you're suffering with this. So we started the process of, doing some, ultrasound, like vaginal ultrasounds, CAT scans, things like that. And nothing would come up, nothing physical that they could find, which I guess in their defense, that's why they just kept saying it was a mental health sort of issue. So that
And what did
happened.
you think though? But you thought it was beyond mental. I mean, that it
I
wasn't
did.
psychosomatic, that there was something real going on.
I did. Because I kept looking at my health history. That's what I think is so critical is like, we're our own advocates and we know our body better than anyone else. And nobody reads a medical chart like a patient, right? And
Right.
so, because we only read ours generally, or maybe our kids or our spouse or whatever. And I remember thinking, in another important part of the story in the reproductive journey, I got pregnant with my oldest daughter when I was 15. And I think I shared this with you when we talked the first time. They talk when you're 15 and pregnant, or a teen who gets pregnant, about all of these sort of economic impacts it'll have, or these, and I don't want to say surface level because I don't want to downplay it. But when you're 15, they don't talk about what could happen, because you were pregnant so young, or because your organs weren't maybe fully developed, or what those things could do from a health perspective way down the road, right? They're worried about you graduating from high school, having enough money, making sure you're getting child support. So, but I
Yeah,
knew,
nobody talks about what's going on physically as you're still in adolescence and you've only had your period for a couple of years and right?
no, that was never a conversation. It was like we were so focused on how are you going to pay for this baby. Um, and so, and when I had her, when I delivered her, I did not have an epidural, so it was a natural birth, but I was induced, and so I had the pitocin and all of that. After I had her, it seemed like everything went back to normal. I mean, again, I think when you're younger, your body does bounce back, but I also think it starts, this layering of what can happen for you in your reproductive health when you're older. Um, the second sort of thing that I kept thinking of is my mom passed away unexpectedly and very quickly at 63 years old of cervical cancer. And, they tend to say that that's not hereditary. And okay. But it drew my attention to more of the reproductive type health stuff. So again, I knew I had this really early pregnancy. I knew I had these miscarriages. And then I have a mom who passes away from cervical cancer, which is pretty rare, just because it's so, treatable. Um, and I kept talking about those things and being told, nope, it's just that you live a really stressful life. You should do yoga, drink tea. I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff. And you're like, what? Okay.
It's
Okay.
like, "Oh, okay, just do some downward dogs and I'll be fine."
Yeah. And but nobody's like, and I don't want to say nobody because like that would be unfair to all the different providers and practitioners and doctors and nurses that I've seen. Um, but I knew that I was like also fighting against the whole like insurance thing, right? So I'm demanding we should probably do more tests. Like, are you sure this just doesn't seem normal? And like, really, I'm going to live this way for the rest of my life? Is it going to get worse? And it's like, well, the insurance won't approve tests just to do tests. And I was like, well, it's not just to do a test. Like, I'm pretty uncomfortable. So the pain would grow. And this was, well, I am 44, and this was I was 34 about this time. This is about 10 years ago. And so they were still prescribing painkillers differently than they are today. So not as cautious. So I would pain manage using painkillers. I am lucky that, I didn't become a victim sort of that crisis. But I remember being worried about that as well, right? Because I sort of had all of the things to be worried about. I mean, I've got addiction that runs in the family. It was something that I was a very busy person, so it would be easier to sort of pop pain pills and keep going than it would be to address sort of the health issues, the underlying health issues. And so I managed on and off that until I had a very personal experience of somebody very, very close to me that, really went from painkillers to a heroin addiction. And so seeing that firsthand really was the day that I was like, can't pain manage with painkillers anymore. Ended up becoming a recovery coach because I wanted to better understand that journey. And that really, for me, solidified, like going through that, I was like, I have to figure out a different way to pain manage. Like, I can't take painkillers anymore. I did try everything else. By this point, I would say my pain was at a 5 or 6, starting to limit day-to-day activities. So,
And it's constant, or is it like kind of ebbs and flows? Like some days are fine, other
at this
days are.
point, it was ebbs and flows. So you would have, instead of day by day, it would be like, I'd have a month of really, really bad pain. Then it would go away for like 3 weeks or a month. Then it would come back, and I would always say it came back with a vengeance. Like, it would just come back, and there was no rhyme or reason, right? So I'd like wake up on a random Tuesday planning a trip to the zoo and be like, it was debilitating. And so I thought, well, this is really weird. And then it started to transfer. The pain would transfer from my back left to my back right. And then the next time it would come to me, be my back left. And it was weird. It was inconsistent. It didn't, nothing, you couldn't just Google it. I couldn't, being my own doctor, like just nothing was coming up. People that I talked to had every different, how this goes. You tell people and they're like, oh, I'm sure it's this. It's probably this. So you go down this rabbit hole. And by the time you're done, you're like, I have every disease ever. And, there's like no hope. Like literally at one point, I like diagnosed myself with 7 different things. And I was like, this isn't working. So when the pain got to where it was, I would say a 7 or an 8, starting to miss work, miss some family holidays, started, just not being able to participate in family stuff like I had. Then I started doing things like acupuncture, oh my God, cupping, tons of massage therapy. Oh gosh, I can't even remember all of the things. A TENS unit, one of those TENS units. Of course, I was wearing that, and then I was allergic to the adhesive. True story.
Oh my God.
I ended up in the ER with a head-to-toe rash, and they said, well, you can't use adhesive like that. They prescribed a $600 cream. I'll never forget it, the $600 cream. And I was like, this is like not a way to live. And then in 2016, my husband and I completely unexpectedly found ourselves pregnant again. And it had been quite a long time from our last miscarriage. And so the first thing I did was call my OBGYN. He is a high risk doctor. So the minute I called, they knew because they had known my history, got me in. And honestly, I remember now, I think back and it's like, people say, gosh, you weren't really excited when you got pregnant with Bodhi. And it was like, well, no, because I just figured I wasn't going to be able to carry this child full term. And so I had no ability to attach, sorry if I get emotional because I just think about it and I'm like, because of everything that happened, because I had no hope, I think those moments when you first find out you're pregnant, even though all women sort of are cautious in those beginning months, I think for me, it was like I didn't even want to accept it or like talk about it. There's a joke that most people did not know I was pregnant until I delivered and posted a picture on Facebook, and then everyone thought it was my grandchild. People are like, "Oh my God, your daughter had a baby," and I was like, "Nope, I did," because by this time I was 39, almost 40 years old, and I just didn't want to tell anyone because I thought it would be this whole big thing, and everybody would be so excited that my husband and I finally got this baby together, and I was like, I don't know if I can carry this baby full term. I had
What? Oh my
an
God, the amount of
interesting,
stress on you, you poor thing.
yeah, yeah, it was stress every appointment. And that had been the thing, is that some of my miscarriages were, and I know that women that are watching are going to understand this, where, you go in, you're going for the ultrasound and you can just see the look on their face. And then they have to tell you like, oh, I'm so sorry, there's not a heartbeat, or I'm so sorry this happened. So every time I would go for an ultrasound, which, most of the time people are excited about that, I would just be like, oh, please, 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 And so I would go to the ultrasound. Well, lo and behold, each time, then we started to get a little bit more excited, obviously. But during the pregnancy, I had something weird happen where I had this massive rib pain. And so I had these weird aches and pains. Obviously, the back ache was there. It wasn't as prevalent during the pregnancy, which thank goodness, because that would have made and complicated everything. Um, and the really interesting part is during his delivery, once I delivered him, I had really terrible bleeding, like excessive bleeding. I could hear them starting to prep. I could hear them call and say, we might need an OR already, might need a blood transfusion. I could hear the nurse practitioner and the midwife saying, we can't find where the bleeding's coming from, and in their defense, they had thought that it would be in the normal places that maybe bleeding would come from, or nick or a tear or something. Couldn't find it. And that took a while. I lost quite a bit of blood during that. And again, not anything that anyone connected the dots again, except for kind of me going like, this has got to all be related, right? And it's not stress. I mean, you're just you don't bleed like that in delivery because of stress. And um so
So
did
what ultimately,
okay.
how did you come to the conclusion? Like, who found out like what you actually have and what do you actually have?
Okay. So last September, so about a year ago today, it was so bad that, and I always want to be careful, like trigger warning, became so bad that the pain was a 10 out of 10. Nothing worked. I was just so sad. I had two thoughts in mind. One was that I was going to have to figure out how to honestly get illegal drugs to make the pain go away. Or I really did consider not living anymore because I thought, this is terrible. I had this little boy who kept saying every day, he'd say, Mommy, does your back hurt? Mommy, does your back hurt? And I was like, this isn't fair to him. It's not fair to my husband. So my mother-in-law, gotta love a good mother-in-law. She said, all right, that's it. You're either calling a different doctor or I am. And so we have a really great hospital and medical group called Frederick Hospital here in Wisconsin. And it's a couple hours away from where I live. I called that day, and I think I shared the story with you. God bless the lady on the other line that answered that day, because normally you'd need a referral. You'd have to, trying to share my story. I know a lot of people call and they have to go through this whole racket. And she got me in to see a doctor almost immediately. He immediately said, we're going to run every single test and figure it out. So I think he knew there were some other things that had happened. I had lost 43 pounds. My iron was a 6. So he said, you're immediately going to get 4 iron infusions. We're going to do a colonoscopy and EBD. We're going to do a full CAT scan. We're going to test you for autoimmune diseases. I'm going to have you see a neurologist, like everything. Never once did they bring up mental health. And finally, an interventional radiologist brought me in and said, I know you're on your way to OBGYN. I know that they're going to recommend a surgery and they're going to recommend a variety of things. But I want to tell you that it looks like you have something called PCS, Pelvic Congestion Syndrome. And it was the first time somebody put a name to it that wasn't mental health. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And he said it is the veins, and he showed me on the sides, and they get really congested and clogged. And so, and it can go from your right side to your left side. So it was like all of these things started coming back to me. I was like the bleeding during delivery. Had the vein been so clogged, and that's why it was so painful, but the pushing of pushing the baby, suddenly all of that blood that had been pooling, and you could visibly see it in my body. My massage therapist caught it, although my MD at the time had told me it looked like a burn from the heating pad. So very interesting. Just, you know, and again, you trust people, but my massage therapist said, looks like there's blood underneath your skin pooling. So now all of it started to make sense. Like, oh, and then a teen pregnancy. So as I dove into what PCS is, every single one of the markers I had. I mean, the whole like having multiple live births, you know, the miscarriages, the early pregnancy, like the teen pregnancy, the pain, and then some of the other sort of, you know, ailments that I had that existed with it. So I had a surgery in April of this year, and it really wasn't to address that, because that doesn't get addressed by your OBGYN. It gets addressed by an internal radiologist. So more to come, but right now one of the treatments is they'll insert these coils into your veins, which will help the blood flow and it not be congested. So, you know, that is our next step in the journey. However, I've seen relief, which is why we're here talking today. I've seen relief just in treating the pain and actually the internal stuff using CBD. I mean, that was literally my last straw, was last fall.
So how did you even get introduced to CBD? What, were you just so desperate? Were you still in pain after they diagnosed you, where you were like, I have to find something that's not painkillers, that's not opioids, to relieve the pain?
Yep. Yep. And so all of that. But last November, as we were going through the diagnosis or the process of getting a diagnosis, my future son-in-law, we'll call him, we were sort of joking around, and he said, Mommy, you just need to smoke a joint. That's the only thing that's going to work. And we laughed a little bit, and I was like, you know, and this is, I love this part of the story. I was like, oh dear God, not me. Oh, we learn, don't we? Yeah, just probably should have done that 10 years ago. But
I know.
I was just of this mindset, you know, like, what? No. And so then he said to me, okay, well, then at least I want you to look at CBD. And I was like, what? You know, I think I had heard about it, but not ever paid attention to it. And of course, my medical community was not going to introduce me to it. So I said, well, where do I get that? And then he said, well, he told me where to go. And I literally crack up because I asked him, I said, am I going to be safe there? Like, I don't know what I thought was going to happen.
Right. And I think this is part of the problem, is that people just don't know, right? The marketing on like marijuana and weed and stuff has just been so, misleading. I mean, yes, of course you have your stoners, but what it can do medically for you is pretty incredible. But go ahead.
Right. You see people get arrested for it, right? You know, people are serving these times in prison. And so I'm like, I'm not touching this stuff. And then I'm like, is CBD weed? Like, I just was so not educated. Honestly, there wasn't a reliable source to go to get educated, right? So I did. I went to a CBD store.
And those watching, CBD is not weed. Just
right.
To clarify.
It is not weed. Yes. You will not get high. It is not illegal. All of the things. But I will tell you that where I went, and this is, again, I think this is part of why we're talking today and why we both love Commons so much, is that, you know, I went in to buy it and there's just virtually no education around it, right? So I'm like flying blind here, and I'm like, look, so I'm trying to I'm trying to tell the people behind the counter, like, I have PCS. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what you have. They want to sell you a bottle of something.
Right.
And so I didn't even understand what type of CBD. Like, but I did buy about gummies, and I started on CBD gummies, and then I got a CBD Delta 8 tincture. Um, and I will tell you what, it was like a new woman within 2 days. And I thought, there's no way. So in my mind, I thought, oh, it just went away, right? It's one of those ebb and flow times, and it just went away. And I used CBD, which PS, I did tell my doctor as I was going through it, my OBGYN, and honestly, they were like, if it works, do it. So I was like, okay, good. Um, and I used these other brands, not really knowing what I was doing, no education around the particular brands, but it worked. So I was okay. Again, no dosing, and I just didn't even know what I was doing, but I knew it helped the pain. And then in April, I got introduced to Commons, and I thought, huh, this is really very interesting that there's a company who their forward, sort of facing piece is educating. And when I met, Jacqueline and Tahira, I said, okay, you have to hear my story because it literally saved my life. If I wouldn't have started on that CBD, there's no I would have made it through. And I really used the CBD after my surgery in April as well. So, I mean, I went through, a pretty big surgery and ended up having my tubes tied, by the way. That's the other piece of the story. My OBGYN said to me, you cannot get pregnant again. You won't survive a pregnancy. And I was like, what? So that's how bad it was. I mean, imagine that she said I wouldn't survive a pregnancy, but yet we couldn't figure out a diagnosis. I mean,
Wow.
like, wow, like what if I would have gotten pregnant? Like we just to go down that whole entire experience. And so I ended up, as part of my April surgery, I ended up having to have my tubes tied, so that I would never, conceive again.
So what kind of relief does the CBD actually provide, and what are you actually taking specifically? What kinds? Because there's different kinds, right? There's topicals, there's edibles, there's tinctures,
Yep.
there's all different sorts of things.
Yep. And I think here's the really interesting. Until I came to Commons, I wasn't able to get sort of my routine, right? And so for anyone that's listening, you've got to stick to it. You have to dive in. You have to change things up. You have to talk to people about it. And so the first thing I started using was our topical stick. So I do use, it's a topical stick. It's really instant. I put it on the pain points in my back. And for me personally, it would help instantly, but I would have to reapply it often. And I don't mind that. It smells great. It feels good. It's all those things. But that didn't work for me every day, all day for the rest of my life because I was carrying this around in my purse, which it was fine. I got to like talk to a lot of people about it. But
Right.
so started using that. Then started on our tincture, and I don't even have that with me right now. So started using the tincture because I wanted to
Oh, I
start to
think I have a
see.
tincture.
You have one?
I have, yeah, I have the
Oh,
the
good.
the melon. Yeah,
Melon.
this
Yep.
actually tastes really. This actually tastes really good, which I like.
Yeah.
But it's like and it comes like in a little pipette, which is nice, and you know how much you're actually taking, which is important, I think.
Yeah, because you can't just guess around. I mean, it's important, you're not going to overdose on CBD, but the reason it becomes important to understand, how much you're using, what the dosage is, the frequency is so that if you don't get to, your maximum relief, you can either add or take away or figure out, sort of what that routine is. And so for me, I started taking that, and I knew that that would be in the mornings, once every morning. So at that point, I'm doing tincture, and then I've got the topical. Um, Jacqueline kept telling me about the soft gels, and I was like, "Oh,
I
is this
love
like a
soft gels.
vitamin?" And yeah, I just like, I think there's so many things that we think in our head, and I don't know. I'm telling you, everything is related to some childhood trauma. So pills, he must, there must be something tied to it. So I like had a hard time with it. And she's like, no, just take 2 every day. Here's what I want you to do. So I added those in, and my biggest amount of relief long term came from the soft gels. I will tell you that. it wasn't just the physical relief, but I did notice that my overall, like, sort of anxiety, I'm a very anxious human. And I noticed that it addressed that really well too. So, like, sort of from the inside out. And I found that I had more energy. Now, whether that's from the soft gels or from not having this pain or even the low grade pain all the time, as we know, that can make you very tired. So then I started on the soft gels, and then I do use gummies like as needed. So I'll use our daytime gummy. I've found using the daytime gummy helps keep the pain at bay as well. And then the nighttime gummy so that I'm getting this like really restful sleep. Obviously,
Oh
I
my God,
do.
so you're doing everything.
No, I really am. And I know it. I just have had to figure out what works for me, and then the final thing is our rescue patch. This is literally one of the lifesavers. I'm not sure if you can see it. Um, this is sort of replaced for me the stick. So the stick I was reapplying often. When I put a patch on right on that back piece where it really hurts me, this will last 24 hours. And so that's been an absolute blessing. So that's what I have now. And I have to tell you, um, knowing that I have the stick and the gummies and the patch, like for me, those are those instant relief things that I just couldn't get before. And so I know the soft gels and the tincture are addressing like a little bit longer term and that sort of inside out. But it's changed the way I think about traveling, going to a place, how long will I be away from home? Like all of those things that I used to have to calculate in my head, I now am like, you know what? I can travel on an airplane because I can put on a rescue patch and I can have my topical. And so um, it sounds incredible. And I wouldn't, if it wasn't my story, I'm not even sure I would believe it because you hear these like stories and people tell you about products that they use that changed their life and you think, oh, come on. Um, I was desperate in my journey, desperate. I tried everything. I consumed everything. I stuck everything on me. Oh God, I paid every provider. I mean, I don't even know what my husband and I have invested into, trying to find relief for me. And so now I'm really, truly, I have, other than during my cycle, that's where I'll get pain. But the pain has now regulated to be more, I would assume, what most women experience during their menstrual cycle, which is more like cramps. And it feels very normal to me versus this intense stabbing, burning back pain.
Wow. So your PCS will be with you for the rest of your life. It's not like you've cured it.
Right.
It's just that
I have
you've been able to now manage it.
Correct. And manage it to, I would say, almost 100% quality of life. I mean, it's funny. I said to my husband, well, for all of those years that I was experiencing just that pain from just that issue, it was masking all of the other things that happened to us in aging. So I like wasn't able to pay attention to other things like that. I am so like tight and tense, right? Because my body has learned to live in this state. And so now I'm like, oh, you could actually take a walk and it not hurt you, or you could stretch and it won't, really, really hurt you. And so I think, yes, I will have it. There's no way to get rid of it. I haven't, it's so early and so new. But I keep saying I want to talk about it to everybody because if anybody's experiencing some of these symptoms and they can't figure it out, it's something I would bring up. I would say, hey, I heard there's something called PCS. Is there something with my veins? And again, can only really be seen. They didn't catch it till the CAT scan.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
crazy. And actually why I think the patch, why it's like what you call the magic patch, right?
Yeah.
First of all, I think Commons is the only company that actually offers something like that. My mother had Parkinson's, and so she had a patch to administer medicine to her. And
Mhm.
patches are really effective because it doesn't have to go through your digestive system, right? So it's going through your blood system, through your skin, which is much faster and more efficient way of getting the medication or whatever it is that you're getting, in this case the CBD. um, and I have to say, because I tried the patch for the first time a few days ago, and it also sticks on really well, and I could take a shower with it. Because I've taken other patches. I think probably a lot of people have taken like different kind of muscle patches, salon pass or whatever, and they oftentimes like rub, like they come off as
Just
soon as it gets
fall off.
wet, right?
Yep. And not even just when it's wet. I mean, I would struggle with that, right? I would have these patches on and they would fall off, or I was allergic to the adhesive. And this rescue patch of Commons, I have zero allergic reaction to it at all. So it does not affect my skin in the way the other ones did. Um, One of my doctors had alluded to the fact that that would be attributed to the manufacturing process and sort of the whether it's cheap adhesive used or if it's not. I mean, I want to be careful what I say about other brands, but I have not had a reaction. I agree with you. You can wear it in the shower and it continues to work. And you do want to follow the directions. So it comes with like a little alcohol pad wipe to prep the skin. And I did find that there's a difference when I don't use the alcohol pad and when I do. Um, in For me, I found a difference in the sort of potency and how it works, which is really quite interesting in my brain that that would be that. So I do say follow the directions, use it as the directions say.
Well, that's
And it
great.
doesn't smell.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, which is
Yeah.
awesome. And I think that that's, you know, there's so much product out there on the market now. And so I just want people to know what are good products and what are not good products, right? Because there's plenty of crap out there as well. And you have to be really careful because you may be thinking that's doing good for your body, but it could be doing worse things for your body if you don't educate yourself.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I mean, so do you have any kind of final words or advice for people, who are chronic sufferers, whether it's pain or anxiety or, other ailments? I mean, it helps with migraines, it can help with menstrual cramping. Actually, the patch is great for menstrual cramping, by the
Really
way.
good. Yep. Yep.
Um,
Yep. You're right.
so
Um,
I don't know if there's any, now that you've kind of not that you've come full circle with your journey, but now that you've realized what CBD can do for those people who haven't tried it yet, um, are there any words or thoughts that you would like to share with people who may be a little, um, I don't know, maybe they're a little bit afraid to try?
yeah, and I think my advice is don't wait because I think this is what we do. We always think I'm going to wait till it gets worse, or if it gets worse. We say that often, right? If it gets any worse, I'll do this. Don't wait because there is literally no reason that you should be suffering with in any sort of chronic pain. If there is a solution for it, use it as quickly as possible. We owe it to ourselves to constantly be looking at our quality of life. And I know it can be frustrating. It took me 8 years, I guess, maybe even longer, to figure out that CBD would work. And it even took me time after that when people told me about it. I was like, and now that I'm like, my husband and I say it all the time, like, oh, I wish I just would have tried it a long time ago. Because I think and especially as women, like we're
Yeah.
like, oh, but to spend that money. And it's like, yeah, but I was going to massages and acupuncture. And every time I went to the doctor, that cost me money ultimately. And so to know that I found sort of this routine and this regimen and this product, my best advice is don't wait. If you have questions, reach out to a reputable company. I mean, here at Commons, we're willing to answer any questions. You can go on our website. There's so much information now. Make sure it's a trusted brand of CBD and stick with it. It's not a one-time thing. It's not like, oh, I try it today and you have to like stick with it and continue to add. And I know that I had a lot of other advice from people like drink water, take walks. I was like, I can't even sit up. I'm in so much pain. And you want me to drink water or you want me to take a walk? And I couldn't do that. What I realized that CBD did for me is it allowed me to sort of get back to like even so that I could start to introduce those other healthy things into my life. And I think that's the other thing. I do have bad habits and people say like, maybe if you didn't, drink caffeine, you wouldn't have back pain. And I would be like, that's my only source of joy an entire day is a cup of coffee or Mountain Dew and you want to take it away from me. Um, and so really now I feel like I have this like clear head and I can like start thinking about how do I need to take care of myself as a 44-year-old woman who is still very busy and has kids and now a grandbaby. So don't wait. Advocate for yourself if you are feeling something in your body, and think about your whole health history.
That's great. That's great. And I'm going to put links down below so you can go and educate yourselves and shop around and see what might suit you best. Meredith, thank you so, so much for joining me today. And yeah, here's to better health.
Thank you. And thank you for doing what you do, because the education for those of us women is very important.